In this tutorial, we will learn how to create a talking head instructional video using Adobe Premiere Elements. Please make sure you've already watched the introductory tutorials linked in Module 2 on our course site. The sample video I will produce in this tutorial is about a mobile app that enables you to use your smartphone as a remote mouse for controlling your computer when you're teaching away from your workstation or your podium. The specific production skills targeted in this tutorial will include what is a cutaway, different types of cutaways, how to create a match cut, how to create a zoom cut, how to insert titles that overlay on top of the video clips, and how to insert fades to both audio and video, and of course how to export a final project. Just so you know what we're trying to do here, let me show you an example of the finished tutorial video. Yours will obviously be different, but this will at least give you a little preview of what the final product is going to look like. Something like this. You're going to have a master shot with multiple cutaways. See if you can spot them in this tutorial video.
Okay, here's a question. Are you still wired to your instructor computer while you teach? Do you have to return to the podium every time you have to click? Or maybe you use one of these USB remotes to advance through your slideshows. They free you from the podium, but they still have issues. The batteries don't last, they're easy to lose, and all they really do is click. Here's a better way. Use your phone. All you have to do is install an app. My favorite is Mobile Mouse Pro. You connect it to the same wireless network as your instructor computer. Not only can you click, but you can also swipe to perform essentially any file or desktop operation that a wired mouse can do. It even has built-in media controls for convenient audio and video playback. So check out Mobile Mouse Pro and take control of your instructor computer.
All right, well, let's take a look at how we might build this kind of talking head video. I'm assuming you've already done the Premiere Elements tutorials that are available in our module. There's quite a few of them. I don't expect you to do all of them, but if you do some of them, you should already know how to do the basics by now in Premiere Elements. You should know how to import files. For example, in this file here, I have 3 clips. I have a master shot, and then I have 2 cutaway shots, and I'll explain how I put those together. But I've taken those 3 clips and I've dragged them down here into my editor. And on video track 1, I have my master shot. This is the talking head shot that is shot from start to finish. And then in track 2, video 2, audio 2, I've got the first cutaway, and then I've got the second cutaway. And what I've already done to this point really is just position these and do a little trimming. You know how to trim now. You know how to drag the playhead here to a particular spot, and you know how to zoom in using the zoom control and grab the edge of a clip and trim it out or condense it down. And so, in other words, you already have some of these basic editing skills, and if you haven't already done this, then make sure you go back and do the other tutorials before you do this one. All right, so let me zoom back out a little bit here. Master shot, cutaway 1, cutaway 2. I think the hardest part about doing cutaways, and let's start off with the first one here. You remember this one from the video we just looked at, right? And this is the thematic cutaway. In other words, we're trying to get a sense of thematic continuity here. The speaker, in this case me, I'm talking about content that I teach. In this case, it's technology. In your video, you're going to be talking about your own content, whatever that is. And you're going to need a clip that refers to something that's relevant to whatever it is that you're teaching. Okay, so in this case, I'm demonstrating what happens when somebody tries to teach and always has to go back to the podium to get the mouse. In this scenario, the hardest part about this really is just positioning the clip. And if you notice here, when I drag my mouse, I'm just talking and then I cut straight to her. And then she runs back and then I cut out. And trying to time that with what it is that I'm saying can often be tricky, and there's no real specific science to it other than one rule. Try always to cut on action. If you watch this here, watch my hands. Very subtly they'll start to move right there. Anytime there's movement or action, typically that's where you want to cut to whatever your cutaway shot is. And it's tough to do in talking head because there's not a whole lot of action. And anyway, so I positioned that video there and that video clip there, and that's a good example of thematic continuity. It just relates to whatever it is I'm talking about. Contrast that with the match cut. Match cut is really, really tough. A match cut happens when you change camera angles. And what makes this so difficult is knowing that you're shooting this with only one camera. If you're lucky enough to be in a studio with multi-cameras, I certainly am not, then this is really easy because you have a mixer and you just press the button when you want to switch cameras. And it's all live and you get it done in one take and it's great. For the rest of the planet, we have to use one camera and then move it after we finish our master shot and then get a good angle and capture the clip. In this case, it's just a real short clip of me pressing the button. And then we have to position it. So I drag it into video track 2 here, and then comes the tedious task of taking the playhead and scrubbing through until I get it right to the moment where the actions match. And for these two clips, that's about as close as I can get. You see where my hand is right here? When I go to the next clip, it's pretty much in the same place there, starting to press down. And it will play all the way through after I press and release. And then you see that subtle movement right there? Right there is my thumb starting to go back down again. That angle of my thumb matches more or less the angle in that shot. And that's why we call these match cuts. And it's very, very tricky to get the timing right. And you'll end up dragging and dropping this clip around and moving the playhead and trimming a billion times until you get it right. But when you do, you play it back and it matches seamlessly. So there's no real science to this either, other than just making sure you always cut on some kind of action. In this case, yeah, you want to match that action from clip to clip. So try to get that thumb lined up there. It looks pretty good. And then my exit as well. It's a little tricky, but that's part of the fun, and I guess part of the art to this. So let's learn something else now. Let's introduce the zoom cut. This is really easy. A zoom cut is another type of match cut, and what makes it, I guess, easier than using a separate clip is that we actually use a different portion of the same master shot and we just zoom in. We just cut out a little bit of it and zoom in, and we're guaranteed to have the timing match perfectly. There is one trade-off, and I'll explain that to you in just a minute. You'll see that shortly here. But let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to reach up and I'm going to grab this USB remote. And you remember the rule, cut on action. So I'm going to wait until my hand gets up right. It's starting to go up right about there, something like that. I'm in the middle of that action. It's even blurred like that. And then I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit. And I'm going to see that scissor icon here. I'm going to razor. We used to call this a razor, or that in the old school days, that's what we would take with film. We would actually razor it. But I'm going to take this scissor button. I'm going to click on it. And what I've done, I've now cut my master shot into 2 clips. And there's a reason we do this, and I'll show you shortly. And I'm going to drag out, and right when I'm displaying that, I'm holding it up, and then I want to find some action somewhere in here where I can cut back. And it's going and going and going. Oh, there we go, right there. Right when that hand starts to move, right there, I'm going to scissor again, okay? And so now I've got 3 clips. I've got this clip, that little clip that I want to work on, and then I've got this clip right here. And so nothing has changed. When I scrub through this, it all still looks and plays the same. However, if I position the playhead on top of this clip, select the clip by clicking on it, now I can go in here and I can take this clip and zoom in. In this case, it will preserve the aspect ratio, so I just have to click and drag that handle. Okay, did you see that? All I did was grab. I have to click in here to activate the handles, and then grab the handle and drag it out. And then I can even click and move this around. And so I'll let you see my eyes there, something like that. And once I'm done with that, now when I scrub back through, you can see what it's going to look like. I'll scrub through real slowly here, and it'll switch right there. It's still a little blurry because it hasn't been rendered. And then as soon as it starts moving again, boom, and we cut back. And this will look real good once we actually export the video. So that's called a zoom cut. Sometimes I might even drag it up into video track 2 just to remind me that I did something differently there visibly on my timeline. That's very helpful, especially later on when I'm trying to do different kinds of special effects or transitions. That may be helpful. We'll see. Okay, so that's the zoom cut. So from start to finish here, we have a thematic cutaway shot, we have a zoom cutaway, and then we have this match cutaway. All of these are examples of continuity, trying to make the different shots that we have here match up and be continuous and add unity to the whole piece here. And don't forget, at the end of the day, we're also just trying to break up the monotony of a really boring talking head video, because otherwise, without any other footage in here, it would get boring. Okay, let's move on real quickly. Just a couple other things we're going to learn. I need a text title in here, and I need to have it at the point where I'm talking about the actual mobile app. So I'm going to position the playhead right about here, right when I say the word app. And at this point, I want to insert a text title that says mobilemouse.com, because that's the website that has this app and has the other software that you need to make this work. So I'll come down here to my titles and text button, and I'm just going to choose a default text. They're all different kinds. You can explore with those, and there are many different categories right here in this pull-down menu. Lots of different cool things, but I'm just going to choose plain text for right now just to demonstrate this. And so I'll click and drag, and sometimes I like to put my text items up in video track 3 just to get it up out of the way so that I know that it's a text title. And at this point, I can come in here and I can add my text, mobilemouse.com, and I can switch to my pointer here and click and drag and move this around. Tell you what, I get rid of the project assets. I'll retract that back up there. And let's see, I'm gonna do some text formatting here. I'll make it bold, and I'll drag down here, make it a little bit smaller. All I did was just click and drag on the font size here, something like that. I'm gonna keep it inside this safe zone here. This is the area where it's guaranteed to display correctly on a television. And we may not be planning for broadcast TV here, but that's what these lines are for. Anyway, so just make sure you keep it inside that. And I'm going to kind of keep it up at about eye level and about centered on something organic in the actual shot itself, which is this particular laptop here. So that looks pretty good to me. Actually, I think I lean my head over a little bit later in the shot, so let me touch that over just a hair to the left. And so if I back up a little bit in the timeline here and then scrub through, you'll see it pop up on screen. Then it will disappear right before we go to our next cut. Okay, so that looks pretty good, but we can make it look better, because if you look at most titles in most cutaway shots, they tend to dissolve on screen. They don't just appear abruptly. So let's go ahead and add a fade effect to this. I'm going to right click on that and choose Fade in Video. And then if I back up the playhead again and then scrub through, you'll see that it will fade in nicely now. See that? That looks really good. I'm just going to let it disappear at the end because it just pops off. That's okay. The fade in effect, I think, is the most effective part of that. And while I'm at it, I might as well take my master shots here, and I'm going to fade this right out at the very end. I'm going to right click there, choose fade, and fade out the video. And you'll see I get these little handles here that indicate that the intensity of the video is dropping down. And if I grab my playhead and scrub over here, you'll see that it fades out nicely. We can do the same thing with audio as well. Right click, fade out audio, and the same thing. Sometimes that's really nice. It adds a nice smooth ending to the whole production. And of course, while we're at it, why don't we just go ahead and do the beginning of the video as well. And so I'll click on the clip, right click, fade, and this time I'll do them both together. Fade in, audio and video. Uh-oh, but look, see how I'm fading in while I'm talking? I need to shorten that duration. So here's where these handles come in very, very helpful. But to make this right, I need to zoom in a bunch here. So I'm going to grab that there. See this handle right here? I need to move it over there before I start talking. Remember the waveform indicates when I start talking. So I'm going to grab this handle here and drag it over and make sure I put it at the same volume level that I had before. Something like that, so that it fades in right about there. But right there. And now I'll start talking as it fades in, and it looks really good. So that's how we do audio and video fades using the right click option. There are other special ways to do this, and I would encourage you to explore some of the different types of transitions. You can add transitions between clips, and you can add, sometimes you can add them to the end of clips. And these are more advanced topics, and we'll learn a lot more about this in EDIT 640. But this is enough to know to be dangerous. So what's our final step? Our final step, of course, is to send the whole thing out, to export the whole thing out. And I recommend that you do what's called rendering your timeline first. Rendering is a process of preloading some of the difficult transition or edits that you've made into memory. And typically your export will go a little bit smoother if you render your timeline. And sometimes if you have really complicated edits, if you don't render your timeline, it doesn't look as good when you scrub through and preview. So rendering is a pretty important process here. So let's go ahead and click the render button. It doesn't take very long, as you can see, just a few seconds, at least for a short video project like this. And after it finishes rendering, it starts playing. We're not going to watch that again. We've seen it enough now, but we still need to export it, because remember, we've only been working on the project file so far. Every time I go to the file menu here and I select save, it saves the project file, which has a .prel extension. We now want to export an MP4, which is the final version, the final file format that we can then upload to Moodle or wherever our end destination is, however we plan on using this particular video. In our case, it's going to go to Moodle, but you might want to put it on YouTube, you might want to send it as an email attachment, etc., to your friends, post it on Facebook, who knows. So now let's go ahead and export this. Go to the top right-hand corner of your screen to the Publish and Share pull-down menu. Choose mobile phones and players. The other options will work for different scenarios, but mobile phones and players is best for what we want to do, which is to publish online. The pull-down preset that you want here is the second one from the top. Apple TV, iPad, iPhone at 720 progressive at 29.97 frames. That will suit most of our applications. You can do 1080, but if your system is not very powerful, it might blow up. So trust me, let's stick with 720. That's still an HD resolution. It's still going to look really good, and I recommend that you just stick with that. So select that one, give it a title, whatever it is you want to call it. I'll call mine Mobile Mouse, and then just click the save. And when you click save, I want you to understand what's happening here. You're going to produce an MP4. MP4 is the container file format. In other words, this file name will be mobilemouse.mp4. But MP4 is not the actual decompression algorithm applied. The one that you want to remember here is H.264. This is a pretty old video codec now, but it's excellent at taking high quality footage and compressing the file size down without losing a whole lot of quality. So the codec is H.264. The file format, the player, in other words, the container format, is MP4. So a lot of people get those terms mixed up. So I want to make sure that you understand that. You're going to have an MP4 extension on the end of this file, but the actual codec, the actual true file type, the algorithm that was used to produce it is H.264. And we'll go ahead and click save. It won't take very long. I've already got it on here, but I'm going to do it again. And you can see it just takes a few seconds here. And when that status bar finishes going across, you have completed making your first simple talking head video with a few cutaway clips. So good job. I can't wait to see these, and I'll see you next time.